Hello and welcome to the Coding Santa Java lesson. Today we'll be going over basic Java data types. Okay, so let's look at over here. Right now, I have 9 words written over here. Each one is a data type. The first 8, int, byte, short, long, float, double, boolean, and char, are all primitive data types. String is non-primitive, but we will also learn about it today. Okay, so let's start. An int. So an int is basically the Java form of saying integer. An integer is any number that does not have a decimal. For example, it could be 5, -5, 19, -365. It could be all of that. It's just any number, including 0, that does not have a decimal. So let's try something else. 37.5, is that an int? No, it's not, because it has a 0.5 after it. However, 37 is an int. An int can be both negative and positive, or 0. So 0, or you can also do -55. And you don't have to worry about the commas because I'm just showing examples of each. And for the public class main and public static void main, string arrays, we don't have to worry about that now. We could go over that in our next lesson. Okay, a byte. A byte is basically an integer, but it has different caps. What I mean by caps is that the value of an integer can only range from a certain numbers. I believe it's -7 digits to a 7 digits. However, byte, the range that it can possibly be is smaller. So of course, byte can also be 9. It could be -9. It could be -9. It's basically an integer except with smaller caps. That's what I mean. 0. It could be 150. So these are all examples of bytes. I would like to point out that int, byte, short, and long are all very similar to each other. Float and double are similar, boolean separate, char separate, and string separate. Byte, short, and long are basically different versions of int, and float is a different version of double. Now let's move on to short. A short is also close to integer. It has the same format, except the cap is larger than byte, but smaller than integer. So for example of this could be 9, 8, -90, 15, 0. And as you can see, there's a limited amount of possibilities you can do. Okay, so now we know about short. So far, the order is all 3 of these have the same format, except byte has the smallest cap, short has the second smallest cap, and int has the largest cap. Now for long, long has the biggest cap, meaning the range of numbers that can be in a long is the biggest. So for example, long is the same as integer, like usual, it could be 8, -8, just throwing out random numbers here. 150, it could be -350. That's the same with long, except the range is greater than int. So let's sum it up. So the ranges from smallest to largest, you have byte to short to int to long. And for now, do not worry about the syntax of Java, as over here we're using this compiler as a notepad. Don't worry about it. Okay, now let's move on to float. Before we move on to float, we have to first know what a double is. A double is basically Java's way of saying decimal. So basically any number that has a decimal after it, or it could even be an int, but with a 0.0 after it. This is what I mean. Double can be 9.9, there could be 15.69, it could be 19.956, and the largest it could possibly be is 16 digits after the decimal. Remember, this can also be 0.0, 9.0, as long as it has decimal after it. The largest possible number, you could do 15.123456789, and then 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So 16 digits after. That's the cap for double. It could also be negative 50. It could also be negative 16 digits after it. So this is what I mean. So that's double. Let's move on to float. A float is the same as a double. It's anything with a decimal. Let's go with 19.05, 15.7, -0.6, except the cap is only 8 digits. So the maximum it could be is, let's say, 99.123456788. 8 digits after the decimal, or -8 digits after the decimal. And so the float is basically a double, but has smaller limits. So now we know about the first six, which two of them are different and the rest are very similar to int or double. Now let's move on to boolean. Okay, so a boolean is basically, it's very simple. A boolean is either true or false. So the value of boolean can either be true or it's false. And so you may ask, why are we going to use booleans? We use booleans, for example, when something is black or white, it's yes or no. For example, is the light on? It's either on or it's off. That's where you can use true, false. Is the water cup empty? Is it empty or not? If it's empty, you use true. If it's not empty, you use false. So boolean is for those situations where it's very black and white, where you do not need a number value. Okay, now let's move on to char. Char is basically a character, meaning it could be a letter, it could be a symbol, it could be a number. It's just a character in general. And in char, we use these apostrophes. So let's do H, that's a char. That's a char H. It could be a symbol, it could be a star symbol. It could be a number. It could be the question mark. So as you can see here, a char is basically just any symbol, letter, or number, except with apostrophes around it. So it's very simple, except it has to be only one. It cannot be a combination. So for example, HIO, that is not a char because it's not one character. However, 15 can be a char because it's one number. Now let's move on to string. String is not a primitive data type, but it's actually the most useful in my opinion. So string is basically anything. There's no limitations. A string is anything that's within the quotes. So a string could be okay, it could be a sentence, it could be coding Santa, it could be a number, it could be 15, it could be a combination of chars, booleans, doubles. It could be, let's do hello, I am coding Santa 15. A string is simply anything that's inside the quotations. So that's why it's very useful as there's no limitations around it. There's no size limitations. It's just basically anything that's within the quotations. You can combine different data types together through string. So as you can see here, we used okay, we had a phrase coding Santa with a number, we had a sentence with both a combination of characters and an integer at the end. You can even add a 15.0. As you can see, the string is just anything that's within the quotation, so it's very useful as you can combine things together. So we've gone over the 8 primitive data types and 1 non-primitive data type in string. Hope you guys learned a lot and enjoyed this lesson, and excited to see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.